shoulder. I love it.
So we should all be celebrating good news together. Well, here's the thing. And I talked about this with Ben Shapiro before we was talking about the mortality rate. I said, hold on a second. The mortality rate really isn't a consistent measurement. We have to look at overall deaths. And you're saying, well, yeah, but that'll just go, or sorry, I said deaths per million, right? Deaths per capita.
Per capita deaths.
And you actually couldn't go per capita deaths any lower than 1 million.
Is that the starting line?
Well, it is for this.
Oh.
Can someone search what capita means?
I don't know it's per million. You can do per thousand.
No,
and
exactly.
Per capita.
But you have to start at 1 million, otherwise it wouldn't even show up on the graph.
Sure. Yes.
So if you look at the deaths per capita, that's what really matters, because you can't just say total deaths in the United States and compare it to, say, Botswana. Right. I have no idea what the numbers are in Botswana, but I assume they're probably not great.
And
probably not great when there is no COVID going on.
And there's not as many people in Botswana last I checked. I don't know.
That was the initial point I was making, correct.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad we got there.
So that's the number that matters.
I'm clarifying.
And I know Ben told me, he said, yeah, but that number's only going to go up.
Yeah.
Sure. But it's also going to go up with other countries. By the way, surprisingly, not really going up in Sweden the way that most people thought would be happening, because they didn't enact some kind of a lockdown like you saw with Italy, Spain, Belgium. I don't know about Belgium, sorry, but Italy, Spain, France, and of course they're actually hit the worst, and we're doing far better than them. But the mortality rate changes the more infections that you see.
Right.
Now, to me, it would seem to be good news when you say, oh my gosh, way more people have been infected than we initially thought, because that means the mortality rate is far lower and most people are asymptomatic.
Well, I was watching CNN and they actually talked about that as being, I know.
You watched it when we weren't on air?
Poor choice.
No, I do it all the time as well.
So I was watching CNN and they were talking about, well, it sounds like there are more infections than we ever thought, as if that were a bad thing.
Yeah.
But obviously,
it turns out
it
that
does
it's a
change
good thing.
the
CNN, you are such a disease.
Were you in an airport?
Look what you did, you little jerk. Brian Stelter, you're what the French call les incompetents. And gay.
I love it.
So,
but explain why that would be a good thing.
Well, it would be a good thing because it lowers the mortality rate. So let me bring this up, actually. We have these numbers here today. This is a study, by the way, from USC and, of course, Los Angeles, the Public Health Department. Not necessarily a bastion. Like, I don't think they're funded by one Rush Limbaugh.
No.
USC. No. So what it is, they looked for antibody tests. Now, keep in mind, there are two different things, okay? And this is really, really good news. Now, still be reasonable. Still, obviously, we need to protect the most vulnerable among us. Every single life lost obviously matters and is tragic, and we feel for them. And the 9/11 firefighters, first responders, NYPD after September 11th, nothing compared to the nurses right now. Yeah. They are our heroes. Nope, not even comparable. Name me any other hero.
Wow.
Can't do it.
Nothing even comes to mind.
Yeah, Nelson Mandela.
Nope. Nope.
Martin Luther.
The Incredible Hulk.
No.
Okay.
Maybe. I'm trapped between I'm trapped between a not wanting to be removed from YouTube and a racist place right now.
So racist
they're all heroes.
Why are all the guys?
They're all heroes.
Yeah.
But the white 9/11 first responders, can we all agree, absolute scum compared to the nurses and doctors of today? Absolute subhuman scum.
Yeah.
The first responders of 9/11 compared, again, context matters, compared to the first responders today. Who do so of their own free will, and it hasn't put a nickel in their pocket.
Yeah.
All right.
So, well, look, let me go back. I want to say that you
want to walk this back?
them. No, I don't want to walk this back. No. I'm saying that you would be happy if they would celebrate that news. I would be happy if they actually reported it. If they,
that would be nice.
Just
Wouldn't that be
put
nice?
it out there.
Yes.
I don't need a ticker tape parade
and this is
for
what
it.
I want to make sure that I have this right here today. So this comes from USC and Los Angeles Public Health Department, okay? They did an antibody test. Now, what does that mean? Someone may not test positive for coronavirus, for COVID-19. But if you test for antibodies, you can then see how many people have had it at some point.
Right, exactly.
Kind of like if you have mono. And I found this out at one point where I was like, I think I have mono. Yeah. The doctor said, well, a test really isn't going to help us. I said, what do you mean? He said, just tell me that you have that you had mono. That's what we can't test if it's currently active.
Scientific.
Because the only test that he had, I think, was the antibody test at his place. I'm not exactly sure. So USC, they looked for antibodies, right? And they said, oh, this actually looks like it's between, I think, 2.8 and 5.6% of the people in Los Angeles County actually had antibodies, which means the number is 28 to 50, 28 to 56, something like
55.
that? 28 to 55 times higher the infection rate than they thought. That means that at the low end, a minimum, and using this sample study shows that 220,000 people in Los Angeles County had COVID, and at the high end, over 400,000. So let's just take those numbers and split them right down the middle. 600 deaths total in Los Angeles County. So that means when you just take the total deaths, by the way, just the total deaths, and you look at the actual infection rate, again, this comes from USC, and they really, really don't want this to be the case. And the only reason that this matters is because they talked about the first young death in Detroit yesterday.
Yes.
And that's front page news everywhere, when that's an exception to the rule.
Right.
Whereas now, we are actually getting enough data to determine what the rule is, It hasn't been trending. It hasn't been reported anywhere. So if you just take those numbers, use the middle numbers. Let's play it conservatively. That means that the death rate at the worst is 0.25, the mortality rate, when you take into account people have actually had it. Now, let's use these numbers. I think in Italy, we know it was 95 to 98% of people who contracted the disease who were deaths. They were over the age of 80 or they had some pre-existing condition. If I'm not mistaken, in New York, it was high 80s and some figures that were cited to 90-something%. Let's play it really conservatively and say, okay, only 80% of the COVID deaths at this point, only 80% are from old people or people with pre-existing conditions. That gives you a death rate, meaning if you are an average-aged, middle-aged, above middle-aged, of average health American right now in this country, your chances of dying from COVID-19, if you get it, is 0.02%.
Wow.
Let's split the difference.
insane.
From 0.2, likely 0.1, to 0.02, let's call it let's just call it 0.1.
Well, and
Let's just go with 0.1, a nice rounded number, because you have to do a point, and you have to add a zero after.
it gets difficult
the
at a
point.
certain point. We don't have the math
Sometimes referred to as a decimal.
that
here,
hurts.
so yeah.
But I prefer point.
Well, and it's funny that we
It's like
come to
triple
that
dot.
number
I don't have
because
time to say ellipses.
you
What am I, retired?
I just say ellipsis, so that's fine. But at 0.1, what is it? That's the influenza death rate every year is 0.1, right? If I'm
no,
not
I think
mistaken.
it's 0.06.
I don't know.
0.06. Okay, so I'm not super far off on that, but all of a sudden you start to see that this has a much lower
It's
mortality
far
rate.
more comparable than people led you to believe.
Yes.
I'm not saying open everything
It's
up.
not the same thing.
And you
I agree.
shouldn't be
I understand.
responsible. That's not what anybody is saying here. But that's all. Here's the thing. That's not what the president is saying.
No, nobody is. Nobody's saying that we should just open up and go right back to the way we were. What we're saying is that you can open certain things up and take precautions and still live life. We live life every single day under the threat of dying.
Right.
Our whole existence is to not die.
Every
right?
time you
We
get
have
in a
food, we
car.
have shelter, we have safety features in cars to keep us from dying. And so we can surely manage a situation like this. What are we supposed to do? Lock down everything forever?
Right.